Let's bring in Miranda Devine, the aforementioned Miranda Devine. He was in the Riff, ace New York Post columnist, Fox News contributor, and Ben Ferguson, host of the Ben Ferguson podcast. Thanks to both of you. Grace and courage and bravery. That's how I describe Mr. Trump. These are not necessarily original thoughts, but I think they're important thoughts, and I think he showed it once again. Grace and courage and bravery.
Under fire for the fourth time in less than 2 years.
Yes.
You know, we forget about the guy who turned up at Mar-a-Lago with a gas canister and a shotgun. I call that an assassination attempt as well.
Huh.
And Carolyn Levitt mentioned it as well. She said she was bustled out with him by the Secret Service backstage on Saturday night, and he was so fearless and calm, and she will never forget it. He would have put them, all his staff who were there, Carolyn's heavily pregnant, he would have put them all at ease and make them not feel worried.
Ben, what was your reaction when you watched this whole thing unfold? I don't know. Were you at the dinner itself?
I was not. I was not there. I was supposed to go, and I ended up not.
I don't go to them anymore.
Yeah.
I haven't been to them in years. It's just too much to do. But I don't go to them. What was your reaction when you saw it?
One, his facial expression is like, yet again, they're trying to kill me. And I think what we've seen from the Democratic Party and their rhetoric is that they are normalizing the killing of any political leader that they don't like. This has now gotten much bigger than Donald Trump. It's Charlie Kirk. I don't go on stage anymore without a bulletproof vest. That's not normal.
Wow.
When you are at a conservative event and you're hugging your friends and you both have bulletproof vests on, it's not paranoia. It's literally family members saying, can you please make sure you wear a vest because you're a dad of 3 kids. Hey, there's crazy people out there that are talking about they want to kill random people at any conservative event, at any speaking engagement. It's no longer, it's not like it's my name. It's the general idea by the left that is, if we tell you to go out there and to kill conservative commentators or the president or the vice president or a cabinet member, this is what they're going to do. You look at his manifesto, you cannot tell a difference between his manifesto and the words of Hakeem Jeffries or Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer. If I gave you quotes, the American people said, which one is the manifesto and which one is the vice president? You wouldn't know.
But it's a fine line. I want to be very careful here. Those people have never called for his assassination. Now,
this is where I would push back. Hakeem Jeffries said maximum warfare everywhere all the time last week.
Well, I understand, but it's not a direct call. I just want to be careful. I'm not...
Remember Joe Biden before Butler?
Yes, their rhetoric has been right up to the edge, okay? And their rhetoric is... It could stir up the violence. I don't disagree with that. I just want to be careful about specific blame here.
We don't want to censor anyone.
Pardon?
We don't want to be censoring people.
That's right.
But shame. I mean, they should be shamed. I don't think we should resist telling them that they are despicable and shameful.
Right. I agree with that. And I think it's crazy what's going on the internet. Okay, for all these followers, Luigi, politics, whatever it's called, it's just absolute insanity. You've been reporting that. Many people have been reporting that. There's nothing you can do about it, I suppose, but it's pure political insanity. And Trump referred to that, you know, as the political crazies. But it is something that we're living with now. Things might get worse. I mean, he has to be very careful as always. He doesn't seem to care as much as some of his supporters care.
Well, I think he cares, but he's not going to live his life in fear. He's the president of the United States. I mean, he's dealing with gangsters all over the world with nuclear weapons. Some nutter is not going to stop him from doing his job. But by the same token, I think that it's not just rhetoric on the internet. This is Democrat representatives. As Carolyn Levitt said, we had a Rutgers poll recently that said that 55% of people on the left, the respondents, thought that it was justified to kill Donald Trump. I'm not sure.
By the way, the majority of them are coming from college campuses. Of the Democratic Party in the polling, those that believe that political violence, killing your political opponent, is acceptable at the highest percentage, is college graduates.
I know.
Why? Because in colleges, they teach you to hate conservatives, hate Christians, hate Republicans. They have completely taken over the college campuses. They are no longer safe for conservatives to speak there. We saw it last week at a law school, for goodness sake, where they shut down someone trying to speak. We've seen the political violence on college campuses against any conservative speaker. We've seen the political rhetoric when it comes to Israel and anyone that's a Jewish student. We've seen it here in New York City. This is no longer just an isolated event. I want to be clear. I think this is the Democratic Party, and they push it up, as you described, to the line, hoping to inspire. The crazies out there go, yes, I will finish it. When you call someone Hitler, when you look at the president and say they're a fascist, there are people that take that and say, well, I should stop Hitler. I should stop fascists. How do you stop them? It's clear they're saying it's to kill him. Well, and as you said 4 times now.
I agree. That kind of rhetoric at some point spawns political.
They know what they're inspiring.
Violence. I mean, I think that's 100% right. By the way, I think it was a Gallup poll, 16% of Americans say political violence is okay. The biggest chunk of that, youngsters 18 to 29. Miranda, what's wrong? Young people, this is such a great country. It's the country that we love. Why would they want more violence? Why would young people, especially with their whole future and life ahead of them, want more violence? I
don't think they really comprehend what it is, because they live so much of their lives in virtual worlds. They're playing violent games. They live violence is sort of a fact of life for them. And they see all around them this increasingly violent rhetoric, this violent country where one side of politics, the Democratic Party, is now normalising that kind of rhetoric that does incite violence, and they lionize murderers like Luigi Mangione,
they laugh about it.
Yeah, I mean, well, we call them the Luigi left now.
Yeah.
That's what they think is the only way to get things done. It's a revolutionary madness.
It's also the indoctrination of our high schools and our colleges and our junior highs. When you have the liberal that took it over, and they were brilliant, it was a brilliant play.
How about the left-wing teachers?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, but when you take over education, and then you indoctrinate a generation to hate the country that is the greatest country in the world, and you tell them day after day, hour after hour, class after class, that America is evil, that the rich are evil, that economic prosperity is evil, that we need socialism, communism, Marxism. You shouldn't be surprised when it says 18 to 24, the highest number of people that hate this country, because we paid through our tax dollars for them to hate this country.
And they voted in Mamdani, who then stands outside Ken Griffin's home, does a video doxing him and basically calling him an enemy of the people, and then he's going to take $6 billion worth of investment out of New York. You have Democratic candidates vying to be platformed with Hassan Piker, another guy like Jimmy Kimmel, who thinks it's funny to call for the assassination or joke about the assassination of Donald Trump.
I'm so glad Melania spanked Kimmel. Really,
isn't she? She's
but he won't apologize.
Everybody's yelling at me, but you got two wonderful. Can I just ask you? This is a great column. Dems must heed Trump's call for unity in the wake of frightening White House correspondent shooting. Resolve our differences. So just the last point. Mr. Trump himself called for unity. He actually said he thought he saw Democrats, waving him as he was leaving leaving the ballroom and so forth. I want unity, too. I want anything better than what we have now. What's the chance that there'll be more unity, more balance?
Look, it's a real pity, because that night there was, I mean, it was only young, but there was this just feeling of hope and expectation and camaraderie. And, I spoke to Amy Klobuchar. We had a lovely conversation at a party beforehand, the senator from Minnesota.
She happens to be a very nice lady, personally.
She is a lovely lady.
Very nice lady.
Very normal. But anyway, I think that there was an opportunity for comity and for people to see another side of Donald Trump, the people who cover him. So that was destroyed that night, and I think he was very disappointed about it. I hope that the journalists in that room, now that they've experienced themselves the threat that Donald Trump lives under all the time, they may stop downplaying it.
Perhaps so. Can I leave it on that note,
Yeah.
Ben Ferguson? You're both terrific. Thank you. Miranda Devine, Ben Ferguson, thank you ever so much.